Hospitals are supposed to be safe, a place for healing, a place where families find hope, not heartbreak. But for over 16 years, something was wrong, something no one saw coming. Patients who were stable began crashing. Cardiac arrests came out of nowhere. Lab reports didn't match symptoms. And yet shift after shift, he was there, silent, professional, invisible. Charles Edmund Cullen was a registered nurse, trusted, unassuming. He moved between hospitals across New Jersey and Pennsylvania, always just one transfer ahead of suspicion. By the time anyone noticed the pattern, he had already killed again, and again, and again. As we delve into this video, don't forget to like this video, share with friends, and subscribe to Murder Files for more delve into true crime cases. Before understanding the man behind the murders, you have to know who he took. These weren't just names on a chart. They were parents, grandparents, sisters, brothers, people who were loved, people who were supposed to get better. Charles Cullen began his nursing career in 1987 at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, New Jersey. His first confirmed kill came a year later, a retired judge recovering from an illness. The man wasn't expected to die. In fact, he was doing better. But then, without warning, his heart gave out. Nobody questioned it at the time. Death was always a possibility in hospitals. That's how Cullen continued. Between 1988 and 2003, he worked at 9 different hospitals across New Jersey and Pennsylvania. At each one, patients began dying unexpectedly. Some were seriously ill, others were on the verge of discharge. One was a young woman recovering from a car accident. Another, an elderly man expected to go home that weekend. Then there was the cancer patient who had made it through treatment, only to die suddenly overnight. There was no pattern in who he chose, old, young, male, female, terminal or not. The only consistent detail was that Cullen had access to their medication, and after he walked out of the room, they were dead. He often used drugs like digoxin, insulin, or epinephrine, administered in doses so high they caused the heart to stop almost instantly. These drugs were recorded in the system, but because they were common medications, they didn't raise red flags until later. Staff at some hospitals noticed odd behavior. Patients coded more often when Cullen was working. Sometimes he would be found in rooms he wasn't assigned to. At one hospital, another nurse caught him entering a patient's room with a syringe in hand, despite that patient being on palliative care with no orders for intervention. But nothing ever stuck. He would resign, transfer, or quietly disappear before formal complaints could catch up to him. Families never got answers. Some were told their loved ones simply passed in their sleep. Others suspected something was off, but hospitals insisted there was no foul play. It wasn't until years later, when law enforcement looked back at medical records and drug logs, that a pattern became horrifyingly clear. By then, Cullen had moved again, and the deaths kept following him. For years, Charles Cullen slipped through the cracks. Hospitals saw him come and go, often leaving behind a string of patient deaths, yet no one raised the alarm, not loudly enough. It wasn't until his final job at Somerset Medical Center in Somerville, New Jersey, that the truth began to surface. In 2002, Cullen joined the staff at Somerset, bringing with him the same quiet demeanor and clinical efficiency that had helped him blend in for so long. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but within months, the hospital began noticing a strange trend, an uptick in codes, medical emergencies where patients' hearts suddenly stopped, often during Cullen's night shifts. In some cases, the patients weren't even in critical condition. Pharmacists flagged medication requests. Cullen was accessing drugs that didn't match his assigned patient's needs. He was withdrawing digoxin, used for heart conditions, in amounts that didn't make sense. Nurses began whispering. Doctors noticed the spike in unexpected deaths. Something wasn't right. One patient, Reverend Florian Gall, came in for a relatively routine stay. He wasn't expected to die, but shortly after Cullen was seen near his room, Gall coded. Later, a toxicology report revealed a fatal dose of digoxin in his system, far beyond what would ever be prescribed. That one case sparked questions. Internal reports started piling up. The pharmacy reviewed Cullen's access logs. Why was he withdrawing so much insulin? Why was he logging into the Pyxis machine under other nurses' accounts? In October 2003, the hospital finally contacted the New Jersey Poison Control Center, which in turn contacted the Department of Health. But even then, things moved slowly. Somerset administrators hesitated to take direct action. Cullen continued working for another month, even after suspicions about drug overdoses were voiced in writing. It was a mistake that gave them what they needed. In one incident, Cullen administered a medication to a patient that was never prescribed. The patient survived, but when the chart was reviewed, the medication order was missing. It was the first undeniable proof that he was giving out drugs on his own. The hospital placed Cullen under surveillance. They compared shifts, drug logs, and incident reports. The same pattern repeated over and over. Whenever Cullen worked nights, patient emergencies increased. It was no longer a coincidence. It was a method. By December, authorities had enough to move in. They brought Cullen in for questioning. At first, he denied everything, calm, blank-faced, and cold. But within hours, the cracks began to show. He had done this before. He'd gotten away with it for years. But this time, someone was finally paying attention. It was a young nurse and a pair of determined pharmacists who made the breakthrough. If they hadn't spoken up, Cullen might have walked again, right into another hospital, right into another job, right into another set of lives to destroy. What had started as quiet suspicion was now an open investigation, and the story was just beginning to unravel. Charles Edmund Cullen didn't look like a killer. He was quiet, awkward, and rarely made eye contact. Colleagues called him strange, but never dangerous. He kept to himself, followed protocol, and avoided confrontation. But behind that quiet demeanor was a man carrying decades of darkness. Born in 1960 in West Orange, New Jersey, Cullen's early life was marked by pain and instability. His father died when Charles was just 7 months old. By the time he was 17, his mother had also passed away in a car crash. Her death, he later said, shattered him. Left alone and spiraling, he dropped out of school and attempted suicide for the first time. It wouldn't be the last. Before becoming a nurse, Cullen served briefly in the U.S. Navy, but his erratic behavior led to a discharge. At one point, he was found sitting silently in a missile control room with a surgical mask on for no reason. Other times, he sabotaged equipment on purpose. After leaving the military, he entered nursing school, where he seemed to find purpose, but not peace. Throughout his adult life, Cullen attempted suicide more than 20 times. He was treated at psychiatric facilities and prescribed medications, but nothing seemed to stick. He got married, had 2 daughters, and then the marriage fell apart. His wife filed multiple restraining orders. She claimed he had spiked people's drinks, abused pets, and left syringes lying around the house. To neighbors and co-workers, he was just odd, socially off. But none of them knew about the private war inside him, or the way he believed he was saving patients by ending their lives. He didn't kill for rage. He wasn't driven by revenge. He killed to feel control. Control he had lost long ago. Charles Cullen didn't stab or strangle. He didn't hide bodies in basements or leave notes behind. He used syringes, small, silent, and deadly. And he did it where no one would expect, in plain sight, in hospital beds, surrounded by trust. His method was subtle, almost surgical. He selected patients who couldn't fight back, often elderly, recovering from surgery, or too ill to protest. Sometimes they weren't even his assigned patients. He would roam from room to room, carrying vials of digoxin, insulin, or epinephrine, medications that, in the right doses, saved lives. But in Cullen's hands, they became tools of death. Digoxin, a heart medication, was his favorite. In small doses, it strengthens the heartbeat. In large doses, it stops the heart altogether. Cullen would administer it quietly, often without a written order. Insulin caused blood sugar to crash rapidly, leading to seizures and death. Epinephrine could cause fatal arrhythmias. Each death looked like a medical event, sudden, tragic, but not suspicious.
He was meticulous. After administering the drugs, he would return to the nurse's station, document what needed to be documented, and go about his shift as though nothing had happened. In many cases, no autopsy was ordered. The patient was presumed to have died naturally, until the numbers started stacking up. The killings escalated over time. At first he was careful, killing a few patients a year, but by the early 2000s the pace quickened. At Somerset alone, it's believed he may have killed as many as 13 patients in just 1 year. He grew bolder, more reckless. Some think he wanted to be caught. Others believe he simply didn't care anymore. Whatever the reason, his method never changed. Clean, clinical, and chillingly efficient. He wasn't just playing God, he was perfecting it. By late 2003, the whispers about Charles Cullen had turned into full-blown suspicion. At Somerset Medical Center, the pharmacy team noticed a disturbing pattern. Patients were dying after receiving medications they were never prescribed, and the orders, almost always, could be traced back to Cullen. Still, hard evidence was elusive. Hospital leadership was cautious. Fear of lawsuits, public backlash, and reputation damage kept administrators silent. Some even discouraged deeper digging. But 2 staff members, Nurse Amy Logren and a persistent pharmacist, refused to back down. Amy, who had worked closely with Cullen, was shocked when police approached her. At first, she didn't believe it, but when they showed her the Pyxis records, logins, drug withdrawals, and timestamps, her doubt turned to horror. She had unknowingly stood beside a killer for months. Police needed more. They asked Amy to wear a wire. In a series of secretly recorded conversations, she coaxed Cullen into talking. He didn't admit guilt outright, but his words were full of strange, evasive phrases. He spoke of patients not needing to suffer, of fixing things quietly. Every conversation built a clearer picture of intent and gave investigators the leverage they needed. They also analyzed the hospital's digital records. Cullen had been accessing drugs he had no reason to use. In many cases, the patients didn't even require those medications. Charts were altered, entries disappeared. Some medications were signed out under other nurses' credentials, suggesting he was covering his tracks. When police finally arrested him on December 12, 2003, he showed little emotion. At first, he denied everything, but within hours, he began to talk, and once he started talking, he didn't stop. He confessed to dozens of murders, names, dates, drugs. Some investigators had to leave the room. They weren't just hunting a criminal, they were trying to calculate a body count. Charles Cullen was arrested on December 12, 2003 in a restaurant parking lot in New Jersey. He didn't resist. No chase, no violence, just silence. When detectives sat him down and started asking questions, he said one sentence that chilled them. "I did it to end their suffering." Then he started talking. In 2 days of interviews, he confessed to 30 murders across 10 different hospitals. The investigators were stunned, not just by the number, but by the calm way he described it all. He named victims, he listed the drugs, he remembered details no one else could. Some of those cases had never even been classified as suspicious. But even then, detectives believed he wasn't telling them everything. In fact, Cullen later admitted that he had no idea how many people he had killed. Estimates today range as high as 400. That would make him the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. As news broke, public reaction was explosive. Families demanded answers. Hospitals scrambled to review their records. Reporters flooded courtrooms. Cullen's face appeared on every channel. Yet during his arraignment and hearings, he rarely spoke, except once. At his sentencing in 2006, as the judge read off the charges, 29 confirmed murders, 6 attempted, Cullen sat still. When victims' families gave their statements, some in tears, he didn't flinch. But when asked if he had anything to say, he whispered a phrase again and again. "Your Honor, you need to step down. You need to step down. You need to step down." He was later diagnosed with major depressive disorder, personality disorder, and suicidal ideation. But psychiatric evaluations found him competent to stand trial. He received 11 consecutive life sentences with no chance of parole. The courtroom was silent as the gavel dropped. He had killed for nearly 2 decades. Now, finally, he would never walk free again.
Charles Cullen will spend the rest of his life behind bars at New Jersey State Prison. No chance of parole, no appeals, no freedom. But for the families he shattered, that sentence wasn't closure. It was the beginning of a lifelong ache. In the months following his arrest, hospitals across the Northeast faced mounting pressure. Civil lawsuits poured in. Internal investigations exposed systemic failures, missed warning signs, ignored staff concerns, and records that showed Cullen's deadly pattern stretching back over a decade. Administrators had repeatedly chosen silence over scrutiny. Some hospitals quietly fired him. Others gave neutral references just to make him leave. He kept getting hired. Patients kept dying. The healthcare industry was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. There was no centralized tracking for nurses suspected of wrongdoing. Cullen's case triggered nationwide reforms. New Jersey passed legislation tightening reporting procedures for healthcare workers. Some hospitals upgraded their drug monitoring systems and revamped whistleblower protections. Still, the damage was done. Families of the victims formed support networks. They shared stories, photos, grief. Many said they never suspected foul play. Their loved ones had gone in for manageable conditions, surgery recovery, dehydration, pneumonia, and never came home. Books, documentaries, and interviews tried to piece together the full story. But even now, no one knows how many lives Cullen took, not even Cullen himself. Some bodies were cremated before tests could be done. Others were never exhumed. The number might stay a mystery forever. For those who survived or lost someone they loved, Cullen became a symbol of betrayal, a man who exploited trust, used his position to kill, and smiled through it all. He claimed he wanted to stop suffering, but the pain he left behind never healed. If this story shocked you, share it. These victims deserve to be remembered, and the systems that failed them need to be held accountable. Subscribe for more true crime stories that go beyond headlines and into the truths hidden behind them. Hit the notification bell so you never miss the next case. Like this video if you believe their voices matter. And let us know in the comments, do you think justice was truly served in the case of Charles Cullen? This isn't just a story, it's a warning.